This week on the Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
I love all those Wookiee characters that aren't Chewie, though. I mean, even Lumpy, Itchy, and Stinky from the holiday special.
Yikes.
Yikes.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a podcast focused on tactics and competitive play for Star Wars Legion. Hosted by Kyle Dornbos, Michael Barry, and David Zelenka, with Jay Shalansky, the man behind the glass.
Welcome back to Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle, and I'm joined by Mike and David. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Weather's better than last week. RPQ happened. It was a good time. I finished first, much to my delight.
Nice.
And I'm going to high command. Yes.
Again.
Ben. Yeah.
Yes.
Feels like just
So
yesterday.
2 for 2.
Feels like just
So
yesterday.
it is.
I know.
So first of all, congrats.
Thank you.
Second of all, I think it says high command on the little card thing, but it is basically worlds now, I think is our understanding.
I think. Yeah.
It hasn't been like super explicitly clarified, but there is no like 8-person worlds next year. I think it's just worlds is at Adepticon, and it's going to be a 2-day tournament with, however many people end up qualifying, like 80, 100, something like that. So
Worlds is the new high command, though, right? Isn't that the
right?
language
That's what I mean. Yeah, high command and worlds are functionally the same thing for 2020, as far as I know.
Yeah. Which is cool.
It is.
The
Well,
exclusiveness of the 8-person tournament is like real decent. But I kind of like the fact that there's like way more people in the field.
So this is Jay. I'm just going to butt into the podcast here. So my understanding is the first day is high command, and then the worlds is like when you get whittled down to whatever. I think the second or third day is going to be the top 8 still, but it's all on the same weekend.
Where are you getting your info from?
That would be legiontournamentscircuit.com.
Oh, yeah? Interesting.
so LJ basically.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, he'd probably know.
If anybody knows, it's LJ. If anybody besides FFG knows, it's LJ. So,
and I think that's still just kind of a assumption. I don't know that that's been officially, signed off on. So that's it. Just
sweet.
Just popping
Thanks,
in.
Jay.
Yeah.
Appreciate the butt in.
No,
See you guys
thank you.
later.
Later, dude. Get behind the glass.
Yeah. Get back to your pen.
actually, I'd like to hear
Right.
Jay's thoughts on contrast paints here in a few minutes.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Because we are going to talk about some hobby stuff today as well.
We are. So we're going to talk about Flyboys, because that's what David ran at his RP.
Yay.
I know we've talked about them sort of obliquely already, but I'd love to talk in more detail about your list, because I think there's some fun little nuggets in there. We're also going to talk ever so briefly about Invader League, because that ended.
It's got a new champion, too. From what I
Yeah.
Yeah, we secured an interview with him, so
Stay tuned.
stay tuned.
heard.
And then we're also going to talk about Wookiees, because actually one of the Discord personalities, Lunta, won a RPQ up in Canada. They do have RPQs up there, in addition to maple syrup and expensive dairy products. And
French people.
Yep. So we're going to talk about Wookiees too. But yeah, why don't we dive right in? So let's hit Invader League first. So the Invader League champion is me.
Yeah, so I'm here with the Invader League champion, Kyle Dornbos. What's up, man? What did you end up running here at the Invader League?
We haven't been talking about it for the last 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
Exactly.
So, I've talked briefly about my list before. I can talk about it in more detail, and also just talk ever so briefly about it was the semifinal and the final games, actually, that were played since our last cast. So it is a Veers Bosk list with 6 DLTs and 3 snipers.
Soulless but effective.
Yeah, it's I also sprinkled in there an officer upgrade and a medic upgrade, and as well as Bosk has stims and hunter, and then Veers has improv, and that's it. So when I first started Invader League, I it was a Freaky Friday experiment for me. I'm a Rebel player, and I wanted to see what I could learn from playing the other side, which actually Jay wrote an article on. I think everybody in both directions could benefit from that experience if you can. Obviously it's expensive to actually collect 2 armies, but like if you have a friend or something that plays the other side, maybe do like a Freaky Friday game, have a swap, spend a day in the other person's shoes, see what it's like. I think it's a valuable experience both for Empire and Rebel players.
Not to mention Tabletop Simulator is great for that.
Right, of course. Yeah, you can definitely do that on TTS, which we talk about all the time. But and that led me to actually buy Empire models. So, there's been there's lots of discussion. I don't want to get down the TTS rabbit hole, but that it essentially like allows people to play the game without buying stuff, which is sort of literally true. But I think generally speaking, it leads to I don't know anybody that doesn't love Legion and own all the models and buy more stuff that also plays on TTS. So. And it got me to buy a whole new faction of actual models. So anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I didn't expect to do well with Empire.
Here we are.
It was my these were my literal first 10 games as Empire.
I'm not going to say anything.
You know how that sounds,
please
right?
I mean, the play style fits me, I guess. When I was making this list, and I don't want that to sound like playing Empire is easy either, because one of the things I learned is that there are several, it's definitely different from Rebels, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier. But anyway, with this list, I was just going for as simple as possible. When Invader League started, Bedouble Bounty was all the rage, but I just wanted to learn one bounty hunter at a time, so I picked
good choice. Apparently,
yep. So and I didn't want too much going on with the rest of my list either, because I didn't want to have to think about a bunch of things that I wasn't familiar with. So that's why I filled it out with DLTs and snipers. It's incredibly boring. It's probably one of the most boring Empire lists you can make. But I guess it works. It's 30 stormtroopers to actually 32 stormtrooper models to chew through, plus the 2 characters and 3 sniper units. So it's a lot.
It is a lot,
and it's a lot of dice. So we talk a lot about luck and mitigating luck. And one of the best ways to mitigate luck on both sides of the coins is to throw more attack dice and make your opponent throw more defense dice. So I know that's super hard hitting analysis there, but
no.
Anyway,
I mean, I'll say it's easy when you have a card that gives you 10 aim tokens.
Stop it! You're acting like we haven't had cards that give us 10.
You actually, I know you actually have 2 of them.
Yeah, so actually I did run coordinated fire in my elims list, but I didn't run a comms relay or anything. It was okay. I probably would have rather had Imperial Discipline in several occasions.
Yeah, I mean my specific problem is lying in wait. The funny part though is that I've seen some really bad ones too.
Yeah,
the thing about it is coordinated fire can, if you have the combo set up, really double as a second line in weight if you really want it to be.
Well,
anymore. Oh well,
that's true.
Okay.
Yeah, not with the.
I did have one game which I think I alluded to already. It was in my round robin where I dumped 7 aim tokens on Bosk with coordinated fire, but yeah, you can't do that anymore anyway. So,
well, I mean, you can get 6 on
them. Yeah, if all of your storms get to take an aim action or get aims from somewhere else and they're close enough to Bosk.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's an optimal use of it, but anyway,
light and weight is pretty good.
It is, yeah, not gonna lie.
Did you run Veers with strict? I don't remember.
No, I did not.
Okay,
I ran him with improv. It was in hindsight. So I think it is. It was pretty clutch in several moments in several games. I don't think it's critical in this list. Not as much as Wonder Twins, because Bosk is a little bit more Well, actually, I shouldn't say he's more flexible than Luke in terms of activation timing. He's more flexible in terms of positioning, but so basically how this list works and why I only took one bounty hunter in Bosk. We've talked about double bounty and we've talked about both bounty hunters on previous episodes, but just briefly, like you want to be able to last first with Bosk all game. And each command card in my hand is designed to be either a first Bosk card or a last Bosk card, right? So like lying in wait, maximum firepower, and then coordinated fire, those are all last Bosk cards, right? Those are cards that you play when Bosk starts the turn in a safe position. And you want to pop out with them near the end of the turn and shoot something. And then he's got push, Reptilian Rampage, and Merciless Munitions, all of which I consider to be quote unquote first Bosk cards that you want to use when Bosk is going, in the first or second activation. So you basically just alternate those all game. And, if you do it right, your opponent never gets to shoot Bosk twice in a row, which is a problem for them. And in fact, so I played the Loot Cook game was last week on Wednesday, I think. So that's ancient history at this point. But it was a pretty tight game. We played Breakthrough, which is probably the worst objective for this particular list. But he was never able to. I put some. He had some early fails on Boba Fett on his saves, so he was like heavily wounded going into turn 5. So he was never able to kind of do like the last minute jump into the end zone with Boba Fett, which is kind of how you win Breakthrough with Veers Boba. So I was able to pull that one out. I made a gross error late in that game that made it probably closer on turn 6. You cast this one, David. But basically, there was a situation. I think I was up on attrition, basically going into the end of 5. Boba was dead at this point. There was he had like a 3-man Stormtrooper unit that could actually make it to my end zone. And I still had Reptilian Rampage, and I could have just double tapped them. And instead, there were like 3 other single unit leaders in that area. I did like the Reptilian Rampage triple move, which seemed fancy to me at the time, but was grossly unnecessary to do Merciless Munitions in the next turn. And then, of course, he just moved his 3 dudes past Bosk into my Breakthrough deployments.
Well, let me contextualize this a little further for our listeners and say, let me tell you, there was some great bait because there were, I think, like 3 single trooper unit leaders.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
These guys that had their squads eliminated, and so it was like a points bonanza if the Deoxys went off.
Oh, yeah, it was a super juicy target, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been like, you would have scored like 190-something points with a successful Deoxys there. So, yeah.
That's absolutely what it was, yeah.
Massively greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%, that's what it was. So it was one of those like turn 6s where I had multiple ways to kill this one unit. And it was like, well, if I fail this way, I still got this thing. And then if I fail this thing, I still got this thing. And as long as I don't pull this token and then improv into this other token, then I'm okay. And like all of those things were happening in the wrong direction. It's funny if you listen to the cast because R1 and David are like going through the like, well, as long as this doesn't happen, he's okay. And then that thing happens, and they're like, well, as long as this doesn't happen, he's okay. And then that thing happened. It was like, anyway.
Yeah, we were narrating a series of events that were like, this is, we think this is the calculation for Luke to get out of this game. And they were like the chips are starting to fall. And we're just like, are we watching this unravel before our eyes?
to Luke's credit, good on him for playing to his outs.
Oh yeah. I mean, he knew what he had to do to win, and he almost did it. So he was focusing on victory points, on getting a unit into the zone, and he did it in a way that made it more surprisingly more difficult than I thought it would be to kill him. He did the old melee a core unit and get him engaged, and and suppress everything else so they can't move to deal with it. So he did a good job of making that a very close game. So Luke's a great player. I'm the one that matters is this weekend. So we'll see. And then my finals game was against Beefcake. You can catch that also if you want on the replay. It we played. It was not breakthrough. It was intercepts, long march. So the first couple turns are a little boring because it's all positioning. But actually, the VOD got split in two, I think. So if you just like pick up the second part, you pretty much miss all the boring stuff. But yeah, he was actually up on attrition going into like turn 3, and then he moved his Bosk into a spot to take a shot at some of my DLT storms, and that turned out to be a vulnerable spot for Bosk. Basically, I managed to get some out of cover shots on him with some storms, a sniper, and then my own Bosk, and took his Bosk down beginning of turn 4, and that pretty much swung it back. So yeah, there's not much to say about that game except that, I think. But yeah, so Invader's over. My little experiment is over. At least maybe
successful one, I would say.
So yeah, it was fun. I'm very grateful for, it was a fun Invader league. All my opponents were super classy. So yeah, I don't know how much more I have to say about it besides that. And sorry for making such a boring list, everybody.
Boring lists are efficient and good. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just gonna insert this anecdote here because this is one of those things about competitive gaming. I realized that StarCraft was not my game because I wanted to look at the graphics while playing, and that was actually slowing me down. Like I wasn't able to get to the next level because I was letting like my enjoyment of the game take priority over playing faster. And that was the moment where I realized this is not going to work for me because, if I'm literally just making the machine run as fast as possible and not enjoying the action of the game itself, then I should not be playing because I'm not having fun.
Yeah. I mean, to encourage this metaphor, if you go back and you watch like the Twitches of like professional StarCraft players, it looks like shit. The game looks like it's from 2002 because all of their graphics are like turned down to like bare minimum settings.
So how does this translate to Legion? Well, Legion is sort of like you're playing the game, quote unquote, on minimum settings in the sense that you are building these lists that are hyper efficient but are incredibly boring because they're spamming one unit or are,
Come on, two units. Come on,
okay,
David, give me some credit.
2 units. Come on, two units. All right, that's fair.
Yeah. But it's not like you got a land speeder and Luke and Sabine and
yeah, right. I don't have that, but come on,
2 sets
I got
of
more than one.
And, I don't know.
It's 2.
You can't really do that.
That's fair.
Okay, fair enough.
That's fair. I guess it's like which unit am I more angry about, the DLT or the sniper? I'm like the DLT probably.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's technically 4, right? Because you have Boss and Beers.
This is a great metaphor. Hey man, I'm guilty too because the RPQ list I ran has the exact same format, right? And so does Wonder Twins.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, at least the least spicy versions of those lists, I should say.
I think your list is really spicy though, which. Actually, what? Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
All right. I did play Flyboys.
Tell us about your RPQ.
You played Flyboys.
So we had the RPQ at Fairfield. We had a bunch of the folks from KublaCon who were local also come to this. Our attendance was a little bit reduced because this is Father's Day weekend, so we had several people who I'm out of town or can't make it, or I'm doing stuff with fam. But we had 10 people, and the terrain was quality because we had the same KublaCon folks with their terrain bringing their stuff. Overall, it was a fun day. I fought 2 Vaders, which was really fun, and then I fought my first opponent, I believe, was Vader Krennic with Snows, and he had limited viz, so I was saved by Long March. Because he couldn't get it all. He couldn't get battle lines to complete the trifecta of Vader snow spam. So that was fun. And then I had to play Nima, who I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with. He's on the Discord, and he's just a really, really good player. He was at LVO, and I play with him a lot. And so it kind of sucked having to meet him again in battle. But that was still a really fun game. But we played Flyboys Mirrors, which was we were basically like which is the more which was the quote unquote better list, but I don't think the list really mattered so much as the bid mattered more, because that was a game that was heavily lopsided by deployment. I really handily won the attrition war, and I had to make several crucial rallies at the end because Luke was mind tricking me, and I couldn't pick up my third box, was recover. So Nima, does what he does best, which is like forcing you to make hard choices and putting you at serious jeopardy of losing if you make the wrong choice. That's something he's really good at doing, and luckily I was bailed out a little bit by rally rolls. The third list I had against Wonder Twins Wookiees. I managed to get Disarray, which was extremely favorable. And again, I didn't have the bid that game, but I managed to make the turn 0 battle card selection game work because I forced my opponent to make a difficult choice, which is something that my opponent in my last game also mentioned to me. Like we both said to each other, we're not really that great at the turn 0 game, but if we could force our opponent to make a mistake, that's just how we win. Like, we're not really good at picking things. We're just good at waiting for the other player to screw up. But a lot of times, these at a competitive level, right? If the skills are both there, like, you're basically waiting for your opponent to make more mistakes than you. As far as the list itself, it's Luke and Han. Luke with push stims and Jedi mind trick. Han with improvised orders and gear. And I will say environmental gear actually enabled me to win my game against Nima, because Han was able to flee over a barricade with a box into heavy cover and then beyond line of sight, blocking terrain, because he was unhindered. And so that was definitely a massive help. I did miss having stims on him, but I think gear is still kind of where it's at with him. If you have to make difficult choices, I think cutting stims on Han is not a bad choice to make. In this case, I really wanted improvised because there's a lot of turns where I don't have order tokens on Luke. For example, standing orders turn 1, reckless diversion when I don't want them to shoot Luke, but I still want Luke to go last. Improv is super useful there. Sorry about the mess where I only have an order token on Han and I still want Luke to go last. So improv has a ton of use there, and I took it over the other kind of popular variants of Flyboys that are running around. There's like 3 of them now. One is like single officer, single medic, and stims on Han. One of them is 2 officers and a medic and nothing on Han. And then one of them is my variant, which is improvised on Han and 2 officers with no medic. And that was actually, I think, very spicy. Mainly because the 2 courage Z6s are crazy. They are super money. They shoot you and they think, oh, I'm going to make this rebel lose an action. And it's sort of like, no, you're not. And then I get to do my move and shoot thing. And then my friend, who he also shot, who thought he was going to suppress, doesn't have suppression anymore. And you've got 2 of those. And so your core units are very well covered. You hardly ever, between the 2 officers and their 2 courage plus the inspire, you hardly ever lose actions on your core units. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths. Plus, the officers themselves are shooting, so they up the average of your core unit's damage to 4, and that's very good. Like, because if you roll completely average, you're getting 2 hits through cover, and then the Z6 on top of it if the Z6 rolls high. So they just shred. It's so good to have the officers. Essentially, yes, it's almost equivalent, right? Like, it's pretty darn close with the suppression relief and the 2 courage there.
Yeah, and actually, if you think about just Inspire generally, like on someone like Leia, the timing of Inspire on Leia is a little awkward in that you want her to go generally like early in the turn so she can hand out dodges, right? But early in the turn, your units aren't necessarily going to be suppressed. Whereas, you've got 5 core tokens in your bag. 2 of those core tokens are attached to units that have Inspire. So you have a lot more flexibility like over when you're actually using that Inspire ability over the course of your turn.
It's the Rebel Compel.
Definitely. And I mean, the opportunities come up like I mean, I guess the fundamental conceit here is that we're attempting to use suppression to trim our opponent's actions, and officers negate that strategy pretty handily. And I mean, compel obviously does too, but compel has a cost, which is maybe it'll be easier to panic you later, especially if they're running with middle management, which has no courage 3. Middle management in this case being Veer's Krennic. Yeah, so you're basically like, not only are you taking the strength of these officers and their ability to preserve your action economy, you're also taking snipers, which are degrading your opponent's action economy from infinite range and are able to backload your core activations so they go later in the turn. So you're essentially performing like a giant last first move on like a macro level because you're shooting with your long range units first. And then as their shots come in, your officers then turn on and get rid of their suppressions. And so you preserve your action economy that way. So, I mean, that's another good use for snipers. Rather than shooting your opponent's snipers, you should play to your strengths instead and degrade your opponent's action economy. Yeah, if possible.
Do you want to talk about that a little more? Because one of the things I think you said about this list is that you basically just like declined to engage in the sniper war, and instead tried to just focus on, your snipers obviously hopefully not dying to enemy snipers, but also just taking out core units instead of focusing on your opponent's snipers.
Yeah, so when you run 2 officers, your core units are really good suddenly because you have all these actions, and they're just flat better than your opponent. Because they have less ability to relieve suppression, they have less ability to economize. A lot of the time, Veers would hand out an aim because he'd go first in the turn, but of course then his Inspire would be wasted, essentially. So against Veers, say, Veers wants to hand an aim to a Stormtrooper, the Stormtrooper wants to move and then shoot range 3 with an aim at your units. And if they can do that, you stand a pretty good chance of losing a bunch of guys if they roll hot. But instead of, wasting your time shooting Courage 2 units in heavy cover, even if you have a chance of killing them or killing, an activation quickly, wouldn't it be better in the long run to force your opponent to only shoot their DLT that turn and not shoot their wide dice that turn, because you're holding them out at range? They have to make the choice. Do I move up for a shot next turn, or do I shoot my 2 dice into your heavy cover with an aim token fishing for crits? So you're forcing your opponent to make those tough decisions when they don't have an ability to get around your ability to deal suppression at infinite range. And that's, I think, a lot more efficient, especially if you have more core units to start out with, like in my last game. And especially if you have much more action preservation and you're essentially not taking suppression and they're taking suppression, your time is much better spent trimming their ability to do damage to your core units. Because as you know, sniper dice pools, despite their relative strength, if they do roll 2 hits, are very binary. Either they get damage through or they don't. And losing one trooper model to a sniper is a lot better than losing 3 trooper models to an aimed shot from a unit of stormtroopers that got an aim from Veers and move shot before you could activate.
And losing that single model also is a lot more palatable if you're not also losing an action in the process via the suppression.
Right, exactly. And it gets even better because Han has Reckless Diversion. So if you hide Han and Reckless Divert onto a core unit that is, undamaged essentially, and force their snipers to shoot your core unit that's undamaged, like, that's marvelous for you. Because now you're basically like under this umbrella of Reckless Diversion. So you have to like find a place where, you're in heavy cover and you're in the lane, and so the snipers could not go anywhere that they couldn't see the core unit that's diverting. Meanwhile, your snipers are free to just shoot their core and pierce them to death. And if you can find good angles, maybe get shots out of cover even. It's very, very good. And it puts a ton of pressure on your opponent to play around it. And eventually your opponent can sometimes just cracks. Sometimes they're like, man, I'm tired of sitting on my hands. I'm getting my ass beat. I'm gonna, roll up on you now with my stuff, and you're like, well, I got Luke waiting for you. You accidentally moved into range 2 of me. Here I go. And Luke just gets in there and cuts them apart. I think in my last game, that essentially happened, and Luke killed 3 guards, a unit of snowtroopers, and Veers before dying to Vader. So I think that's definitely like value for points right there.
So how do you how do you use Luke and Han in this list as far as command card timing and stuff like that?
So turn 1 is usually standing orders, I feel. Turn 1 could also be against Veers. If you didn't have very many good deployment options, you can play My Ally, but that kind of stinks. That's only good if you have an obvious target, because you're basically hunting for free dodges on Luke, and My Ally is definitely one of those cards where you are looking to get that free dodge on Luke so Luke can do something aggressive. In terms of timing, so there will definitely be a moment where the change of plans becomes obvious to you, because you'll find yourself confronted with the critical turn, and you'll see it coming. His Luke is in jump in range, or his Vader could implacable for a heck of a lot of damage on me, and you'll know when to play COP because you'll see it coming. You'll just either see your opponent measuring and it'll tip you off, or you'll do your own measuring and maybe you'll notice where they are. I had a couple of moments where I failed to do so, but my opponent didn't punish me for it, so I was grateful for them for not noticing what I noticed. Like, for example, I had a moment where Son of Skywalker would have just cut my Han in half, and I got lucky that my opponent didn't see it. Then there was another game where he did notice, but his Son of Skywalker basically whiffed. I had a game where Luke makes contact after double moving, rolls 3 hits on the first swing. Han uncannies his way into 3 blocks and takes 2 damage. Then the second swing, Luke rolls 2, and then Han takes like 2 damage. So Han was just like chilling there, and it was 4 wounds, but Han wasn't dead, and that was the crucial thing, is that Han wasn't dead. And then my Luke had yet to activate, so my Luke just like walked in there, pushed him out of melee with Han, and then engaged, and just murdered him right back. But to answer your question about command card timing more specifically, your slow cards are important. Like your 3-pip, your Return of the Jedi is very important because that's your only 3-pip, and that's another reason why Improv is so good in this list. You don't want to end up in a situation where you want to go first with both characters. That's definitely very important, because Han in particular is vulnerable. You want to try to get into a situation where either one wants to be first, or one of them can afford to wait for a while before they jump in, and then you just improv your way past them if they come up too early. But try not to make too many try not to have too many fires burning at the same time. Does that make sense? Like you'll have many situations where if a unit doesn't go first, it's going to take a lot of damage, and if you have multiple of those situations and not enough control, you're going to be punished by your opponent, who will see that and realize you don't have enough bandwidth to deal with the situation on the table, because the game is not you take your turn all at once. It's an I go you go kind of game.
Yeah,
so you can only activate one unit at a time.
Right, and that was always my struggle. When I tried Flyboys, was getting it down such that like only one of them, because you basically have to alternate, right? Because at some point you want to use some Son of Skywalker, and at some point you want to use Sorry About the Mess, and obviously you don't want those to be at the same time, so because they can't be. So that was always my struggle, is like timing my positioning such that I didn't need that to happen.
A lot of the way that I solved it was hiding Han until late in the game and not like engaging too quickly with him, because that had definitely punished me in the past. My first few games where I played Flyboys, I tried to be aggressive with Han and defensive with Luke, and that was definitely the wrong play. It's much easier, I think, to threaten with Luke and then bring Han behind him sort of in Luke's shadow to then go last and just blow things up. And hopefully maybe your Luke will be safe in an engagement, or Luke will be somewhere where he won't get shot immediately, and therefore Han can just mess, and then Luke's timing is not quite so sensitive. And when I say safe melee, I mean it's like, well, Luke is engaged by like the tattered remnants of a snowtrooper unit he destroyed, essentially.
Right.
That's relatively safe for him. He could probably dodge and block his way out of damage. It's never guaranteed, but again, I actually did have a snowtrooper punch my Luke in the face. That wasn't fun. He crit me, and I spent the dodge, and I rolled the blank. So get wrecked. So I mean, it was that was essentially the summary of command cards. I think you just it's really just being sensitive to the effects, and that's the list's biggest struggle, is that all of the cards that it brings have incredibly powerful effects with very specific timings. And managing those timings is super crucial. Like knowing when to reckless. For example, when there's a turn where the gun lines are finally meeting each other, that's a good time to reckless with Han out of sight, because then you deflect all the fire onto your most defended unit, and then your gun lines are free to aim, shoot, or do whatever. Because your opponent has no choice but to shoot the diverting unit if you have your diverting unit in a very public place with heavy cover. Yeah.
So generally you use it, obviously you have to put one on Han, and then you use the other one on like a rebel trooper unit that's in cover.
Yeah, one that's like, sometimes I even use it on an officer, because the officer's not going to suffer too badly from taking a couple suppression, and his buddy officer can then inspire him, and then he can inspire someone else down the chain. So they inspire off each other during the diversion turn to make the suppression punishment much more manageable that you receive from being shot by a bunch of things all at once. But really, I think diversion is best used, and I saw this in your game against Archeo in Invader League, and I got inspired by it. Archeo used his diversion to force your DLTs to shoot something that wasn't his front line, and I think that's brilliant. Like forcing long range weapons to split off from the main gunline battle, super brilliant. Yeah, and especially snipers. Snipers are so badly affected by diversion because they're infinite range.
Yeah, so essentially, the moment you're referencing, I had like several stormtrooper units, at between range 3 and 4 of his dudes, and he basically put the diversion at the limit of range 4 of my DLTs, so I could either, move up into the teeth of his units out of cover to take that range 3 shot at his diversion unit, or be forced to pull the DLT out of the attack pool, and just throw the E11s at one unit and the DLTs at the other, and it's like a perfect setup for reckless diversion against against DLTs specifically, because obviously they have a different range band than the rest of the unit.
Yep, and that's definitely a mitigating factor and way that you can use that version to punish your opponent for trying to max range you with their gun line.
Yep,
and it really nerfs their damage. Having to only shoot whites. And I've always thought of the DLT. The DLT's dice are so consistent. I've always felt that it's basically giving your stormtrooper unit blast at range 3, because its dice are so consistent. And if you can take that away from stormtroopers to force this 2 dice gun to shoot heavy cover in one portion, and then force them to try to hack through another unit that they want to shoot in heavy cover with 3 dice that are white, I think that's a huge win for you.
Yep.
You've basically taken away their major strength.
Let's back up here.
Sure.
The DLT gives them blast. They don't do any damage without the DLT.
Well, that's my point. You basically, the two hits cancel cover. It's essentially the same effect as if you had a blast keyword on a 3 white dice pool. Essentially,
which is horrible.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, with the DLT, it's still not good. That's only 1 point. I don't know, 1 in a 30.
Yeah, but with an aim token, it's substantial. I mean, ultimately, the point is to get them to breach cover, or to get them to not breach the cover anymore with the DLT.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're trying to do. DLTs do not grant sharpshooter 2. That would be great.
Well, I think of it that way. It's essentially the same thing, as long as you get 2 hits.
Yeah, they're pulling 2 hits. They're pulling 2 hits off, basically that way.
Yeah, precisely. Any more questions about Flyboys that I can answer? I'm trying to think of things that. Okay. One more thing. So that I just saw this on the list here. Something that is really good that Flyboys does is that it has incredibly consistent damage between the heroes and the Officer Z's. The Officer Z's averages are like 4 hits essentially. So even if you rolled like, slightly cold, you still have a chance to do damage against heavy cover. Han has red dice with Surge and Pierce 2, and Luke has, his beat stick, and like an aimed Luke shot is, probably going to net you 5 or 6 hits. And so you have very consistent damage across multiple sources and significant access to Pierce. And you have units that don't lose actions through suppression. And those are like the 2 big things about Flyboys that I think are most highly recommended. On top of all the great stuff you get with like COP and Diversion and all the other stuff with Luke. So yeah. Cool. You want to talk about Wookiees now?
Yeah. So I love me some Wookiees. One of the Lunta from the Discord, I guess, won an RPQ up in Canada with Wookiees. So I figured this was a good time to talk about them. Because I don't think we've actually done a Wookiees episode as far as like how to Wookiee yet, right?
Yeah. I think we had they were released, and I don't know if we did like a long form episode on them.
I think we had a hot take Wookiee episode, but I don't think we had like a proper Wookiee episode. And if we did, it's been a while. So yeah, let's talk about them. So let's talk briefly about the strengths and weaknesses of Wookiees versus other Rebel Special Forces options. So they are a lot of hit points. Each model has 3. So if you take the Bowcaster, it's 12 wounds, which is a lot, obviously. And then each of those models has 3. So taking individual wounds, you're not shedding dice like you are with the Z6 squad, right? They are also very good both in melee and at range. They're kind of like like an all-purpose unit, right? They have Indomitable, so they don't really care much about suppression. They have Unhindered and Expert Climber, so they can get around really easily. And then they have both a strong attack pool in melee and at range when you give them the Bowcaster with good dice and Pierce. So they're very strong. I like to call them a linebacker unit, kind of like fleets. A lot of people sort of just reference them as like super fleets, which I think is a good way to think of them. They're almost twice as expensive, but they're also considerably more durable and good in melee, unlike fleets. So that's one of their drawbacks. Obviously, they are expensive. They're also short-ranged. Their effective attack range is range 2. Technically, the Bowcaster can shoot at 3, but you're just throwing 2 dice at range 3. So unless you're shooting something in the open, you're probably not going to get any hits through. So yeah, they're the other downside to them, and this is an unfortunate downside with all non-entourage special forces units, is that they are not a sniper, right?
Yeah.
Or a strike team.
Yeah, they're also worth 3 of them, essentially.
Right. If you're taking the Bowcaster and, we're going to talk about loadout here in a minute, but suppose you're taking like the Bowcaster, Tenacity, and Recon Intel, that's 116 points. 3 sniper strike teams is 132. Yeah. So, they're almost the same cost as the 3 sniper strike teams, which is obviously a lot. That said, I think like structurally speaking, for the most part, these guys are replacing like 1 sniper strike team and then a Z6. Most lists that I've seen Wookiees run in that are effective are, either Luke Han or Luke Leia, some number of Z6s, and then 2 snipers in the 1 Wookiee unit. You do see Wookiee skews occasionally, with like 2 or 3 Wookiees. But usually that means you have to go down to like 8 or 9 activations, which can be a problem. So, not that those can't work. I've definitely seen some scary lists like that once the Wookiees get in there. they can be really difficult to deal with. So that can work. But my personal Wookiee quantity favorite, if you will, is one unit. So
just enough to tear your arms off.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, just enough to tear your arms off. You guys want to talk about loadout?
I think tenacity is staple to these guys.
I agree.
I think that's probably the most obvious one. Like, they're almost always going to be wounded, and there's nothing you can really do about that. So, getting a free die in melee. It also really helps preserve their melee efficiency as they get ground down. It brings the floor up pretty significantly.
Yeah, even if you're just down to the unit leader, you're throwing 2 blacks and a red in melee, which is nothing to shake a stick at.
And they surge. I don't play them enough. Yeah, so
they do. Yep.
Yeah, so you're looking at 17 out of 8, so it's like 2.15 hits or 133 or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's a little over. It's ever so slightly over 2 hits. For one
that's
model.
without a name token and stuff. So you can, like, I don't know, in melee, if you just got one guy left, like, dodge attack is, like, not bad.
Yeah. But yeah, it helps bring their damage floor up quite a bit. And even obviously since they got 3 warns per unit, you can be down 1 or 2 wounds on that first Wookiee and still be having tenacity active. For 8 blacks and a red, which is a sorry, my cat is trying to open a box behind me. If you're hearing what that,
it's actually kind of funny to watch on your webcam.
Yeah, you can actually see her, can't you? She loves boxes. She will, in fact, try to open them when they are taped.
She kind of looks like a Wookiee, actually.
She does, yeah. Yeah, and she has actually ripped taped Amazon boxes open. So I don't know how she does that. But
it's her Wookiee lineage.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Not ripping arms off, but Amazon Prime boxes. Those are in her wheelhouse.
Funnily enough, I'm gonna point of lore here. If you're a Wookiee and you fight barehanded, apparently that means you're like a savage, uncivilized barbarian. Makes you a mad claw. You're not supposed to fight with claws.
Yeah, that's why they use those. What are they called?
Rick blades.
The Rick blade. Yeah. There's like a whole comic about this white Wookiee who's like a mad claw. I forget the name. I love all those Wookiee characters that aren't Chewie though. Yeah. I mean, even Lumpy, Itchy, and Stinky from the holiday special.
Yikes!
So does that mean that Chewie is an uncivilized Wookiee since he doesn't fight with a Rick blade?
No, he fights with a bowcaster. Well, maybe, I don't know. No, he overpowers it.
He beats people up with his
fist. All the time. He uses his fist. He doesn't rip with his claws. The claws are the thing, I think.
The real question is, does that rule still apply if you're an indentured life, whatever it is?
Whatever Chewie was before Han found him.
A life debtor, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, he's a life debtor. So, which is I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe not. But yeah, you're right. I guess you never really see him use his claws. He's ripping arms off and body slamming people. So I guess maybe that's okay by Wookiee standards.
Yeah, or strangling people.
It's okay if it's not an open palm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. It's a blunt weapon.
Yeah, sumo plexes and fists are okay. Claws not okay. So
he's actually some sort of paladin because he himself is not using edged weapons. He's
there you go.
Doing something different. Yeah.
Oblique D&D reference there.
Yeah, he refuses to use edged weapons.
All right, so where were we? We were talking about tenacity and other upgrades.
Don't put grenade. I see people putting concussion grenades on these guys, and I'm like, just why? Just charge.
I mean,
it does the same thing.
Minor tangent. People put grenades on way too many things.
Kind of agree.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the question. Since we're having a grenade tangent, before we get back to Wookiees, is there any unit that you should be taking grenades on besides snowtroopers?
I mean, I think the most reasonable one to put them on is the Z6 unit with fragmentation grenades. I don't think it's very good, but I think of the units that aren't snowtroopers to put grenades on, that's probably the best.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that can potentially be a very scary die pool, right?
Yeah.
You've got, four reds or 5 if you take the extra dude, and then 6 whites all with surge crit. So
yeah, I mean,
impacts on fleets as a last resort is also decent.
Yeah, I can see that.
As a last resort, yeah.
I think the fragmentation grenades bringing the Z6's effectiveness up by 50% is a pretty big deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and you're going from black to red with the rest of your squad too. So
yeah.
But when are rebel troopers ever at range 1 and you actually want them to be there?
Well, that's the thing, right? If you're at range 1 with a Z6 unit and they're still alive, they probably won't be for very much longer.
Right, one of you messed up if a Z6 unit is at range 1 of something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see it in like rebel mirrors a little bit more than empire mirrors. If you're at range 1 in an empire mirror, you're probably about to take flamethrower to the face.
Yeah, or a lightsaber or something.
Yeah, or a lightsaber or a royal guard attack or Bosk meleeing you or Boba flamethrowing you. There's a lot of things that can go wrong there.
What's funny is I feel like they're specifically good against Vader somehow. Because Vader's like slow enough that he might not quite catch them, and then they're gonna just toss and run away, and just you play kite the Vader. Look, man, all day.
If you want to put your rebel troopers in range 1 of my Darth Vader, please go for it.
Well, I'm playing intercept, so I have to. In order to score, I have to.
Oh.
All right, so grenade back from the grenade tangent.
Yeah,
hard no.
So yeah, don't take them on Wookiees.
Stop.
Their basic attack is black, white at range anyway, and their melee is obviously black. So it's totally unnecessary. If you're close enough to grenade something and you want to be there, just melee them.
They have charge for free, and frankly, it's use the charge keyword. I mean, if it's early on in the turn and you guys play Rebels more than I do, so correct me on this if this thought process is wrong. But my inkling is that if it's early on in the turn and your Wookiees have a choice between shooting a unit and getting into melee with a unit, getting into a melee with a unit is a much better option just because they're not going to get shot to pieces.
Yeah, it depends on where your position is afterwards, right? So especially if you have a chance to wipe them.
Yeah. If you think you're going to kill them.
Because they do throw. Yeah, because we've talked about doing this with Luke, right? Where when you engage, you want to make sure that you don't wipe your unit if it's early in the turn or that you can't be withdrawn from. Luke only throws 6 black dice, and he does have Pierce, which is great, but Pierce is optional, so you have some control over how many units you actually kill. With Wookiees, you've got potentially 8 black dice and maybe a red dice, and that's a lot of dice. You can't choose to roll less dice, so you have less control over if they're going to wipe their target. So you got to think about if you can shoot and then still be in heavy cover afterwards versus charging a unit, wiping them, and being in the open versus your opponent's entire army.
Yeah.
You got to think about that. Personally, I like to so let's finish talking about loadout here real quick. So I think recon intel is also, if you've got 2 extra points anywhere in your list, it should go there.
Yeah, it's cheap.
First, it's cheap. It's 2 points. You get them off the field faster. You can use them as a soft counter to Pathfinders because you can get in range 2 before the game starts potentially. So it's I think it's great on them, recon intel.
Yeah, you can also move to line of sight block and cover quickly if the deployment zone didn't afford you any.
Right. I think that other stuff that I've seen on them, I've seen duck and cover on them. They do have 2 training slots. I could see it. I know Master of the Force Luke pioneered this a while ago. I think it's fine if you can find the 8 points. They like cover. They're unhindered, so you can run them through woods and stuff without slowing down, and that 1 suppression is going to improve their cover to heavy.
They also don't care about the suppression, really.
They don't care at all about suppression. They're rolling red dice to rally, so sure, throw an extra suppression on them. And obviously their saves are terrible, so you want as many static hit cancellations as you can get from cover or dodge or whatever. So I could see it. It strikes me as a little bit of a luxury upgrade. But anything else that you're considering for Wookiees?
I think if you're taking anything other than tenacity and intel, you're inflating an already expensive unit. for the most part.
They have 2 trainings, is that right?
Right, yeah, they have 2 trainings.
So I've run, this is overkill, but I've run Hunter Wookiees before to specifically threaten heroes. It is hilarious
That does
when it
sound
works,
hilarious, yeah.
but it's sad when it doesn't. But it's basically like, oh, you took a wound, here I go. Here's my aimed charge. And if you started close to me, I have 2 aims now, because now I take a, just get a very consistent big attack against like a Boba or something, and you don't have Pierce, so Boba just rolls his normal saves, and you just sort of laugh in his face. But if Boba was canny, he'd probably be whipcording you and jumping away before you could even get close. But anyway, that's a thing that can happen. You can take Hunter on him. It's excessive though. The black dice are already tremendously consistent.
I mean,
so
Hunter is a great upgrade in general.
It is.
I think it's going to be.
Heck yeah.
It's gotten a little worse lately, but I think it's going to come back in a style here.
Tauntauns and dewbacks are like, Hunter City, right?
I mean, any time that, there are multi-wound non-hero models in the meta, I think Hunter gets a lot better. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of Royal Guard. We're not seeing a lot of Wookiees. So it's kind of on the downswing, I think. But bounty hunters are all about it, so.
Yep.
And bounty hunters are good. Hot take.
What? Whoa. What world are you living in? Bounty hunters are good.
Whoa.
All right. So, any other upgrades for these guys? I don't think so.
No.
Oh, well, so we should talk briefly about bowcaster versus non-bowcaster.
That's true. Take the bowcaster.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like people try and do melee Wookiee skews with just the 3-man units. The bowcaster is 10 points, because the Wookiee model costs 25 points essentially, right? And then you're getting a red dice and Pierce.
It's an expensive upgrade.
And impact. Well, yeah, I mean it's 35, but when you think about the fact that you're getting an extra Wookiee plus the bowcaster,
I mean it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
I do think of all of the special forces squads that the Rebels have available, and maybe the Imperials too, Wookiee warriors are the most likely one to be good without a heavy weapon in it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I've thought about it a lot, and I've never tried it. But 3 Wookiees with tenacity is 79.
Yeah, and it's pretty cheap.
Respectable.
I mean, it's less than the cost of 2 snipers. I mean, that's about the cost of like an officer fleet squad, right? It's probably a little less.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta hide them though, because they're only got 9 health now.
And they don't have Pierce, and there's a whole kit and caboodle. I take that back. There is one special forces squad that is better without a heavy weapon, and that's probably Royal Guard, because Guardian. Yeah.
Yes.
Because Guardian. Yep.
Yeah.
The electro staff is kind of optional there. Yeah, I don't know. That's my take on the bowcaster. I do think it's expensive, and it's hard to justify in a lot of lists. I think that's the main reason you don't see a ton of Wookiees. It's because of how expensive the bowcaster is.
Yeah. But and that just makes the whole unit expensive, basically, right? Yeah. But you're also looking at, we talk about them being like mini fleets. With the Pierce in there, you're looking at roughly an average of 3 wounds to a stormtrooper unit. Well, I guess it'd be the same to a red dice unit that's not Pierce immune, without a name token. So it's not bad at all. And with a name token, obviously, like it's quite a bit better. They're actually ever so slightly more efficient than a Z6 with their ranged attack once you throw the bowcaster in there on a per point basis. So, yeah. So take the bowcaster. I think it's the short advice, but if you want to run them with just tenacity, for 79 points,
it's defensible at least.
Not terrible.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about how to use these bad boys.
Cagely.
Yeah, cagely.
Cagey.
Yeah, that's a good, because they will get pasted in the open, like any rebel unit, but especially one with, Nurse Surgeon on their save. They have the literal T-shirt save. That term comes from 40K. orcs would wear t-shirts and have a 6-up save on a 6-sided dice. So that's exactly what Wookiees have. The t-shirt save. Fur, as it turns out, is not very good at deflecting blaster bolts. So yeah, you definitely want to be cagey with them. I like to hold them until, the mid game basically, and then kind of go in there once you've got some weakened units. If you can use them with Luke and use force push, just like we talked about with fleets, to pull enemy units towards the Wookiees around corners and stuff, so they can shoot them without exposing themselves. That's great. And then just use them to plug holes. Basically, they're a great countercharge unit against aggressive melee units like Luke. All of their durability is tied up in their wounds since their save is so bad. So they're actually, we like to use the term effectively pierce immune. Obviously, they're not actually pierce immune, but when you think about how many wounds they have, Luke does an average of a little under 4 hits with his lightsaber, right, without a name token, 3.75. So, he's killing like 4 stormtroopers if he jumps in there with a lightsaber, but he's only killing 1 Wookiee. So they're a good tar pit unit for other aggressive melee units.
Yeah, when I encountered them with the RP2,
that's good.
They rolled like 2 saves total. So I think your point about being effectively pierce immune is well taken.
Yeah. I'd take 2 saves. Well, and that's on average if you burn a Wookiee all the way down. So they, I think we've used the term also before on the show, effective wounds, which is essentially like a unit's wounds divided by their save. So Wookiees have 14.4 effective wounds, which means on average you'll have to push 14.4 hits through to actually kill them, which is almost double that of a Rebel Trooper squad. So, because a Rebel Trooper unit with Z6 is 7.5. So,
yeah. That's a little bit. Really, what you need to compare it against is like 2 Rebel Trooper units, right? Because that's about what their cost is.
Well, right. So, 2 Rebel Trooper units would be 15.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I say almost double. But
2 Rebel Trooper units with Z6s happen to be 124.
Yep.
And Wookiees like fully loaded is like 116. So
yeah, only a little bit less.
Yeah.
But you also can't take 9 Z6s.
No, but I have a feeling that if you could, you would.
You would.
I would.
I would. Oh man, they are so good.
Oh man, a game of Grand Army, is that what it's called? Grand something. Yeah. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah. Grand Army, yeah, the 1600 point per side format.
Like 10 core units. Yeah.
Yep.
So you definitely, it goes without saying you want to use cover with them. You want to use line of sight blocking terrain. They do have both unhindered and expert climber, so they benefit from quote unquote more interesting boards. I feel like a lot of tables lack pieces of terrain that are just designed to be like impediments, things that slow you down but don't actually offer anything useful as far as cover is concerned. A lot of tables are just lacking generally in like difficult terrain besides linear stuff like barricades. It's just more difficult to make. A lot of the 3D printed stuff doesn't have like, if you're gonna, I say it's difficult to make. You can get a piece of felt, right, and call it a forest or like a group of bushes, and that's your area of difficult terrain. But like as far as good looking stuff is concerned, it's a little harder. So that tends to be less common. But use those terrain ignoring keywords that they have to their advantage to move around the table.
And I don't know, use like actual line of sight blockers with them. That dude with the sword that's like 200 feet high is really annoying.
Yeah, and he's the unit leader, so you can't just defeat him first.
He's like, "Hey guys, here I am. Please shoot me."
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got the Luke Skywalker problem.
Yep.
With his lightsaber.
Is it? I actually have
big old furry arm in there.
I think it's actually a little bit taller.
It is. It is. these things are like if you look at them next to the normal height minis, they're just huge. And if you put the guy with his arm up there, the guy's like I can say he's like 9 feet tall.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So yeah, don't like don't like put him behind a piece of terrain that you think is line of sight blocking. It's not.
The amount of times
sword.
I learned my lesson.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
crates.
Anything that's like a box or a crate that's like the normal height of a mini, they can't hide behind. Not the way you want them to, at least. So just keep that in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
And that guy never goes away because it's the unit leader. Otherwise, I'd kill him first, like grenade guy on the Death Trooper units.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Command card.
How do we use
these?
Oh yeah,
they're great with both Luke and Leia's cards. No Time for Sorrows and My Ally.
I think they're.
They can be good with. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say they can be good with Han. With Reckless, I don't know that you want them to be the actual Reckless target because, you want something cheaper doing that. But they're good to fill those holes that Han makes.
What if you run a naked squad just for diversion and then you have your Wookiees
75 point
front
RD squad? I actually don't think that's like a terrible use of them.
No, it's
well. No. What? Well, yeah. I mean, you could do that with a naked Wookiee. You could also just do it with a naked Rebel Trooper. Yeah, like a 40-point RD squad.
I actually think
an entire squad of Jeffs.
Well, so I actually think if the Special Forces slot was not such a big deal, the naked Wookiee squad would be a much more efficient RD target. Because they don't care at all about the suppression that's coming in, and their wounds are cheaper on a per wound basis.
Yeah,
that's a very good point.
But you care about that suck op slot, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Ripperoni.
Yep.
Rip.
So yeah, they're great with My Ally and No Time for Sorrows. I like, to the extent that I run them, I usually do it with Wonder Twins, and then I run them near Luke so that Luke can give them orders. It's usually in a Wonder Twins list, your orders are going on Luke Leia. If you have 2 or more pips, if you're running them with Wookiees, your orders are going on Luke Wookiees. So.
No Time is just absolutely amazing on the turn that you want to charge.
Well, or even if you want to just pop out, shoot,
No Time's
pop back,
busted
you can
card.
use No Time to do it.
I don't care what unit you're talking about.
Yep.
It's awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think it might
remember when people were like, this card isn't very good. Let's drop it.
I think it might be the best Rebel 2-pip.
Actually, yeah. Yes, bar none, I would say. RD is damn close, but NTFS I think is more
an
useless.
argument to be made for Sabines. Sabines.
For what?
For Symbol.
Oh, yeah, I agree. But she's, I agree. She's not quite out yet, but
it's the recover time.
I do agree with that.
I mean,
well, and that graffiti token is amazing.
If you do it on turn 1 and it's relevant the entire game, that's a lot of value.
Yeah.
A dude Sabine with 2 officers. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody getting suppressed.
Nope.
Yeah, so we'll see if that one everything is chalked up to be. But right now, No Time is definitely the best 2-pip Rebels have access to.
I think so. I know that some people would consider that blasphemy to say that's better than Reckless, but Rebels have pretty good 2-pips.
Reckless means you have to take Han,
Hey, we just talked about how good Han was.
Oh, gee, what a penalty. Oh.
Well, so, I mean, yeah, sure. But, I mean, Leia's still 30 points cheaper.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, that's her biggest thing. Is she's 30 points cheaper. She's got Sharpshooter 2. She's got Bombardments. She's got, Saber Skins, which is, questionable. But, hey, man, that double acti, if you can find a window, let's talk with Neil about this. That's one of those cards that's like you should avoid this special rule because if you're not understanding enough, it'll hurt you. But if you understand it better than the average, it will help you a lot.
You're talking about Saber Skins?
Yeah, the double activation rule.
Yeah, I have warmed to that card immensely in the last few months.
It's when it's good, it's really good.
Yeah, I also think it's amazing with strict orders.
Yeah, the chaining together thing is super good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, should we close this thing out with contrast paints?
Contrast paints.
I know that Jay is excited to talk about contrast paints.
Literally everyone is talking about contrast paints.
I'm literally sitting here watching him paint with contrast paints.
So, and I know we're running up against time, so I'll be brief and I'll cross promote my podcast because I'm sure I'll be talking about it a bunch on mine.
This guy,
tomorrow.
He's like, we gotta go, wrap it up, boys.
But I bought them. I've been using them since they came out. I'll say a couple brief things. I think that they are good. I know a lot of people are either they love them or they hate them right now as far as how the spectrum has gone. I think they're good. I think they're highly dependent on the minis that you're painting. So, Mike and Dave, we were talking about this before the cast, is that they're real strong with Rebel Troopers and they're a little weaker with Stormtroopers just because they do well with all those crevices and like nooks and crannies and folds of the Rebels. They don't do as well on just flat surfaces like Stormtrooper armor, for instance. I would warn this. I think a lot of people have made... I saw a lot of posts, especially on the Legion Facebook, about, hey, I did this Rebel troop in 40 minutes. If you're doing 4, 5, or 6 units in 40 minutes, you're doing something wrong. It should take you at least an hour and a half, even with contrast paints.
Hot take, Jay
Which is still great.
Well, I mean, because they speed you up, but you're still going to need to be good at... they don't make you better. And I think a lot of people are going to get disappointed with that. Like, you're going to buy contrast paints because of the way they've been hyped up. And you're going to be like, if you're terrible at painting right now, you're going to get these and be like, these are going to make me amazing at painting. And that's not what they do. They just let you skip a couple steps is basically all that they do.
Sure.
Right, but you still have to actually apply the paint to the model in the important area.
Because basically what they're doing is they're letting you do your base, wash, and highlight in one step. That's sure. What it's letting you do. And I think a lot of people are thinking, oh my God, these are going to make me an amazing painter. No, they're just going to make you a faster painter. That's it. That being said, though, as I'm sure some people know, I'm trying to play a similar list to David played at the RPQ, a Flyboys list. I'm really high on right now. And so I had just 2 Z6 units left to paint, and I did one of them with the contrast paints. And I'm like, oh no, I'm starting all over because I think they look that good. And it made my other paint jobs look that much more terrible. So I really enjoy them.
So what you're trying to say is it did make you better.
I think in the fact that yes, probably it, but only because of this, and this is why, because I think in my rush to get my other ones done, my wash and highlight were sloppy. Where this one is a lot, it's all 3 base, wash, and highlight all at once, and I can be more careful and get a better look overall.
Sure. You can stay focused for an hour and a half as opposed to 4 hours.
Correct. Well, right. Where now, as we're talking today, I haven't been painting that long, but I've had the contrast paints for 2 days, and I'm almost through a complete 800-point Rebel army. I literally have 6 models left. And it's all with contrast paints. So it just sped me up, completely, where that to make something table ready. And this is why they designed them, right? They're not stupid. They knew what they were doing, but in order to make something table ready before it would take you what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If you're really good at painting, maybe longer, maybe shorter, depending on your style. But now you can do it in a few days. If you got, the skills.
Yeah.
And I found I had watched this video by a 40K painter out of, I believe, Sweden. And he did what I'm doing, which is just contrast paints, but then he'd heightened all the areas with like the finish work, and it just made them look spectacular. And I think you have that option to like go over them and do like all the finish work and like bring up some of those areas with like some brighter colors or darken some of the shadows with some darker contrast if you want. But at the same time, you can literally just do like all the minis I'm doing right now, besides the bases, are all just contrast paint. And they're good to go. Like I'm completely satisfied with how they look. So, but yeah, so I'll go way more in depth on my podcast about it if anybody really wants to, listen to me ramble on for 40 minutes about it. But that'll be tomorrow on the Fifth Trooper podcast.
My cat wants to listen to you ramble about contrast paints.
Perfect. I'll send a box that when it opens, it just starts playing my voice. How's that?
There you go. She'll be opening it herself.
But overall, I would give them, out of like 5 stars, I'd give them like a 4-star rating. I think, just really quick, I think depending on the color too, they get a little wonky.
Yeah, the lighter colors seem like they have some trouble.
When you
I noticed a couple of the blues seem weird too.
Like, I think I was watching Crabak's video. The yellow looks really good. The red looked decent. The white looked questionable.
It's good I found it for like the officer because he has that white beard. If you toss the white on there, it kind of does a gray. And so it gives his beard some depth. I'll say this for any of you thinking about doing these with Rebels, the camo, there's a camo one and a militarium green. Those are really, really good for Rebels. And then if you do like a skeleton horde or a what is the other one? Oh yeah, this Agaro Stoons. Those are really good for like a khaki, like a light brown. And so I've been using those with the snake bite leather for like the pouches and the belts and the cross and backpacks and stuff. But that's good. There's one for like weapons. That's a gray, like a griff. No, not that one. Sorry, that one's good too.
Jay's just like looking down at all his contrast paints and like juggling them.
Yeah, I'm like.
Jay pronounces Games Workshop paint names.
Oh God, I have no idea.
Basilicatum Gray or whatever the hell they're called.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. That one's good for guns. I really like that for guns. Like it works really well, and it gives you your darks and your highlights, and they look like metal, like with one go. I don't know. So I think there's a handful that are really good, and then the other ones are okay, and then there's some that are bad. But overall, I think they're a good purchase, especially for Rebels. I don't think they're good for Empire, like Stormtroopers.
Which means they're not going to be good for clones, probably.
Oh, yeah, I was hoping I could just get away with doing clones in those, but oh well.
I honestly don't know if they're going to be good for droids. Like maybe the regular droids, but anything with larger flat surfaces. Like I tried to do one of the medic droids with it, and it's fine, but it's not great.
I bet you the darker colors are probably fine if you want to do your clones in like a dark color or something, because their like flagship product with this was like dark color contrast paints on space.
Yeah. I mean, the flesh tones are good. The flat surfaces are where it kind of falls short. But other than that, if you got a Rebel army, dude, go for it. It's well worth it.
It is good for large flat surfaces is airbrushing.
Yes.
This guy.
Maybe we can hit that. I know, right?
I looked at like airbrushing videos and stuff over the weekend. Man, that looks like a world of complicated I don't even want to get into.
Yeah, it's it's not something you want to just like if you're just learning to paint, like dive into. It took me probably 15 years of like normal painting before I was ready to dive into airbrushing. It is like cheating though. like even more so than contrast paints. I think it's like extra cheating.
I think they would be good combined.
Yeah, we're not talking about airbrushing
No, I think
today,
they're a good combo, though.
Yeah,
you know,
I can see
so
that.
if you want to go over with an airbrush and get all your base down, and then hit it with some contrast to finish it off, I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
I remember hearing it was similar to airbrushing like a wash.
Yeah,
something.
and it's finicky like a wash. You know, for anybody who's used a wash or a shade, it's it can be finicky like that, and so I think you got to watch yourself because it's this weird, and this is what they designed it for, right? It's like this weird middle ground between base paints and washes, and it's like it's weird because it's like they're both true at the same time. So like. You know, like anything that you would have applied when you're applying a base and anything that you apply when you're applying a wash, both are true while you're doing a contrast. So you need to just like watch yourself. And, you know, if it lighter, you know, if you're using less of the wash, you're going to get a lighter shade. And if you use more of the wash, it's going to go a little bit darker and get thicker. And so you just got to be careful. And like I said, I'll go into more detail on our podcast if you guys want to listen to more. And, you know, overall, though, thumbs up. I've given you like 4 different rating systems on these. I gave you 4 stars, thumbs up. Yeah. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Stars, thumbs. 6 out of 10 salt potatoes. I don't know.
I give it 2 green lightsabers.
Give it 4 burgers out of 5.
How many Hoffs?
Just one. The one and only. All right. We should probably close this out because, you know, now we're just memeing.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I could talk about painting for another hour, so yeah, we should probably just stop. All right. Well, next week is going to be after Worlds. And actually, we're going to have to talk about recording because, well, yeah, next week we'll record after Worlds.
Probably not on Monday. Based on what we just heard.
So we'll have that to talk about. FFG put out a pretty uninspiring preview article today.
Jeez, Kyle.
There was nothing in there that we didn't know already, so you know, it was just like here's the stream times. That's it. They didn't have anything on like prizes or like who was even going.
That was the thing missing that I thought was the most interesting.
Yeah, it's like 8 of the players.
Why?
You know, top Legion players, and they didn't name anyone. So
well, controversial statement. It's not about you. It's about their stream, Kyle. So get on it.
I know it's not about me. But it's at least about the 7 other guys.
Nope, it's not about any of you guys. It's about watching their stream.
I guess.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Maybe let's wrap this up.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to
we dig too heavily into this.
Anyway, yeah. Worlds this weekend. Watch it on FFG's live stream, and
because that's what they care about, their live stream.
Oh boy! All right, you're done.
We gotta cut Jay off. All right.
Get behind the glass.
All right. So I'm Kyle.
I'm Mike.
I'm David.
And we are the Notorious Scoundrels. And we'll see you next week.
Join us next week for another episode of the Notorious Scoundrels.
This has been a 5th Trooper production.